we were playing Would You Rather. The first card he pulled was, would you rather go deaf or go blind?
They planted that 100%.
But that's what's crazy. Molly, I was like, pull out every card and tell me like how many of those there are. He's like, there's one. It was not a—
How did they not show that scene? You will not believe who I just got off a call with. I know you guys are gonna be so excited. I got to chat with Madison from Love is Blind, our fellow RP girly. You guys might have seen this video where I had to basically speculate a lot. I was reacting to my feelings watching somebody with RP on Love is Blind, but I had to like make a lot of speculations. So today I got to actually chat with Madison about all the things I was curious about, and I know you guys are gonna love this conversation. We chatted for an hour and a half. Obviously, we're gonna edit some of that down, but there was just so much good stuff that I don't wanna edit it too much. So this is going to be part 1 of our conversation, and then you can come back for part 2. Let's get into it. I don't know if you saw the full YouTube video that I made about reacting to like you being on Love is Blind. I do not blame you if you didn't, because I refuse to watch anything that is about me unless I am 100% sure it is not hate.
Yep, valid. I did actually watch it and I thought it was great. And I thought you had so many good points. So I am very versed in what you were talking about.
Okay, great. Because basically now that I have you captive here on this Google Meet, I get to ask you all of the things that I was forced to speculate about in my reaction video to you being on the show. I'm sure you've been doing like so many podcasts and conversations since being on the show, and a lot of them have probably focused on like the dating and the relationship and what's like being on the show, whereas mine is gonna be like, so RP, huh? A little bit different take than probably the other interviews that you've been doing, but I know.
By the way, like I've been waiting because it's like you get it, you know, it's like people that don't understand, it's 100% just, I don't fault them, it's just an ignorance thing, right? They don't know what they don't know. And so it's like I try to kind of talk about it, but it's like I'm excited because this is somebody that fully understands. Like you were my icon when I was first diagnosed with RP, so I am ready to get into all of it.
Yay, okay, because I know that that's what me and my audience are here for. And I'm sure you saw like the clip on Instagram and stuff when that trailer dropped. I was like, RP, she has RP, I know it. I know that's RP when I see it. Night blindness, tunnel vision, might go blind, that's our RP girl. And I was so excited, and I like stayed up late on a work night, like binge watching instead of prepping for my speech the next day, because I was like, I gotta power through this. Like I have to know what's up. Like we want representation, you know, like there's so little representation for those in the blind community, period. And then to be so specifically like your exact condition, it's like unheard of. It's just like exciting when you see that and you want to like know like what's up. Okay, what kind of representation are we getting here? Because they used you as the trailer.
I was definitely the clickbait, right? I mean, which I'm happy to be because I've been able to educate so much on it, and I'm totally in the same boat as you. Like when I first found you on Instagram when I was diagnosed, I was like, wait, what? RP? Like somebody else has this and is like actually talking about it. So to now kind of be, you know, some sort of representation for low vision blind community, and really specifically the RP community, I can't even tell you how special it is.
I want to hear about your diagnosis. When did your diagnosis happen? Are you the first person in your family to have the disease?
Yep. Yeah. So I have the recessive form. So nobody in my family has it. I definitely started kind of noticing signs when I was younger. I was diagnosed at 21. But I would, you know, go from like recess to inside or playing at my friends' houses, and like they'd be running around inside. I'm like, dang, like I am not able to see right now. You know,
yes.
It's kind of just, you don't realize that it's not normal. You know, as a kid, you have no idea. And especially not having somebody in my family to kind of guide me on that. It was very confusing. But it really kind of came to a head. I remember I'd gone on a camping trip with my sister and my brother-in-law, and they were doing like a night sky viewing of like stars. And I'm sitting there like, I am not seeing the stars. Like, I remember the stars. I remember being able to see them, but all of a sudden I was like, something is off, you know? And so I had gone, you know, I'd actually talked to my eye doctor just because I wear corrective lenses as well. And I talked to my eye doctor about it for a good 4 or 5 years. And they were telling me I had ocular migraines. And, I had what I call kind of like TV static or like visual snow all the
Mm-hmm.
time. Like that's just kind of my usual filter over my vision. And they weren't able to pinpoint anything. It was like they were doing my retinal scans. And for whatever reason, that doctor was not seeing the bone spicules, that you see on the back of the retina. The kind
Was
of like,
it an optometrist or an ophthalmologist?
it must have been the optometrist
Okay.
because that's where I was getting my glasses. Yeah.
So that might be why.
I think so. And then I switched to a new optometrist and they did my retinal scan and she was like, hey, like, have you ever been diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa? And I was like, what? I'm like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. So she sent me to a specialist and that's when it was confirmed. So yeah, I was diagnosed at 21 and it was just a really, really shocking diagnosis.
I feel lucky that like I was diagnosed so young that I just don't know differently. Like I was diagnosed at 4 years old, started my medical journey at 6 months. So I was just like raised with this diagnosis, but I can only imagine at 21, it's like, yay, I'm finally legal to drink. I'm becoming an adult. I'm graduating college. And it's like, oh, by the way, you're also going to go blind. And how shocking it must be, but I am also the only person in my family with it. Nobody else in my family's history has ever had it. They say my gene is so rare, like nobody in the family's future should ever have it. Nobody in my family should be afraid to pass this on. Like I am just the lucky one, took it for the team.
Genetic lottery, that's what I always say.
Exactly, absolutely won the genetic lottery there. Absolutely the transition of going in from recess to back inside for school, it would be so dark inside. And then all of a sudden it was like the lights turned on and I could see again. But for those 10 minutes, I was like, how is everybody else like walking full speed and acting normal? And I'm like clinging to the wall to try to slowly walk back into class. And you're exactly right. Like you don't know what you're not seeing.
100%. And it's like, it's crazy because it's still, it's still very much like that for me. I mean, going into a movie theater, it is so anxiety inducing, actually, this is interesting. I went to a movie premiere the other day and, I was invited there because they saw me on Love is Blind, whatever. And we got there a little bit late. So I come in and I have my flashlight. I'm holding it down to the ground so I can, see if there's stairs. And the person in there was like, you need to turn your light off. And I was like, I have a visual impairment. Like I have a disability. I need this. And she was like, I don't care. Turn it off. And it was like, it was my first time having somebody say something like that to me. And I was like, okay, so you want me to turn this off?
And fall on my face.
Yeah. And I did. I mean, I ran into everything. I spilled my wine on people. I mean, it was a whole thing, And so it's like, even now, I mean, it's whether it's not recess, but now it's like going from, outside to even just going to a store, or like when I'm shopping or whatever, I have to kind of stand there for a minute and let my eyes adjust as much as they can.
So you're 28. So you've lived with this diagnosis now for 7 years. Have you noticed much of a change in your vision over these 7 years?
I have, primarily peripherally and primarily at night. Although I will say it's definitely gotten where my eyes feel quite a bit more sensitive in bright lights. So, I mean, that was definitely something that I noticed when I was diagnosed, but it's become a little bit more prominent now. So yeah, I mean, year over year, there is a steady decline, but it seems like in the last 2 years, there's been a little bit less, which is, really good. And I'm still able to drive, which I'm very thankful for.
My speculation was correct. I did speculate that you were able to drive still, and I was right.
Yes, I remember you saying, you're like, I think Joe said that he walked her to the car. I'm like, yep, I do still drive. But I try to limit my night driving as much as I can.
That's one thing that's so interesting is the RP experience is such a huge spectrum, which is what I'm like always trying to say to people is like, I know people with RP who can drive a car until they're in their 60s. I know people with RP who aren't even diagnosed until they're in their 60s. Like it is such a wide spectrum. And then there's people like me who go blind really young, who are diagnosed super early. It's such a huge spectrum, and truly like the only two symptoms that are overarching are night blindness and tunnel vision and like that slow decline. But other than that, I mean, there's people whose central vision is like 20/20.
It is. It really is. And that's what people don't understand. It's like you were talking about in your video where it's like, I don't look blind, And so it's very confusing to people because they think like, oh, low vision equals cane, equals a dog, equals, all these different things. But it's like, no, it is such a spectrum and it's so individual for each person. Because it's like, same with you. Like I've known people that were diagnosed when they were 16 and they've never driven. And I know people that are, in their 80s and they still have some kind of vision. And so it really is so, so individual. And like your RP is different than my RP. Like I also have the flashing lights where I'll get the kind of like weird circular light that almost breaks apart kind of.
Yeah.
And, it's very confusing for people that are like, oh, well, I have RP, but I don't have that, or, whatever. So it's interesting to kind of talk about it.
More than like representing blindness, you represented like RP specifically, because you can still drive a car and you don't use any mobility aid yet. And like in many ways, you're still dating and living a life of like a sighted person with vision loss, but you're not like living the life yet of a blind person dating. So it was kind of like you were like their soft launch of being able to have like some kind of representation in like an easy way for viewers to comprehend. And I talked about in the video like why I think that is, and why I think it makes sense, and why I think shows like Love is Blind will never go further than that necessarily. And it's like as frustrating as it is for blind people wanting that representation, I also do understand it. I was curious though, because even in this conversation, like you're talking about not being able to use the flashlight and like tripping and walking into people and spilling, like I know the decision to use a cane is such a hard decision, and it comes with a lot of heavy emotions, and the majority of us only use a cane once we like absolutely have to, because it's such a hard adjustment emotionally and mentally. Like so many of us live with internalized ableism, and it's so hard to accept. And I remember one of my O&M instructors saying his hardest clients are people with RP. He's like, those are the people who will fight me on using a cane till they're like completely blind. Like for some reason, people with RP do not want to use a cane. They will literally cease to function in the dark, and they will just be like, oh, I'll just stay home. But the big thing that I talk about with a lot of people in that transitionary period of being like, when do I need one or don't I, is like, number one, you really want to use one before you actually need it, because needing it means you've probably gotten in an accident and hurt yourself or somebody else or both. And that's like a really not so fun situation to be in when you're like forced into it instead of choosing it. And the other thing I say is like, ask yourself, would I rather look like a confident, capable, blind person, or would I rather look like an ignorant, rude, stupid person? Because a lot of the time, those of us with vision loss are accidentally doing lots of things and we don't even know it, right? Like we're cutting somebody in line at the grocery store because we didn't see that they were there. We just frankly look like a jerk, but they don't realize like we actually just couldn't see them. Is there like anything in you that's considering using a cane in certain moments, like low lighting situations? Or are you still in a place where like you just can't even let yourself go there?
It's an interesting question. And I think it's a difficult one because, RP is so individual, right? And it is so different for each person. And so for me, there's not anything in me that's like, oh, I'd feel ashamed of that, or that I would have any kind of like necessarily like stigma around using a cane. Like I'm 100% like when I get to that point that I need the cane, like I'm totally ready to be like that bitch rocking the cane, like in a rhinestone
glitter cane. Yeah.
Yeah, like I have absolutely no problem with that. I think you bring up a good point, because it is interesting when I'm in like a dark bar or I'm in a restaurant or something and people go to shake my hand and I completely miss their handshake. I mean, the number of times I've been told like, don't leave me hanging is ridiculous, right? And I totally do like run into people or like knock somebody's drink and like don't even know where they are to be like, I'm sorry, you know what I mean? And so I get a lot of times people thinking that I am drunk or that I'm just oblivious.
Yes.
Or, there's all kinds of little things. So I think what's interesting is I don't think that I would necessarily want to use the cane just for the fact of easing other people, right? Like I'm not in the camp of like, oh, I'm going to just be a jerk and like, be a bull in a china shop and run people down and, I'm blind, so it's okay. I don't feel like that by any means. But at the same time, I don't feel like I need to use a cane to make other people more comfortable with my level of disability. While I think that I could use it at some points, I'm not in a place quite yet that I think it's totally necessary. But I'm also not excluding myself from doing things, right? Like, I think there was a time in my early 20s when I was first diagnosed that I was like, I don't want to go out because I'm nervous, like I don't want people to think that I'm socially inept because I'm
Mm-hmm.
missing social cues or, things along those lines. But as I've become more comfortable with my diagnosis and as I've been becoming, more of an advocate for speaking my truth, I feel more confident in being like, hey, I'm really sorry, didn't mean to bump into you. Like, I can't see right now. I can't see in low vision or in low light. And so it kind of gives me almost an opportunity to also educate because I am still in a space that I'm able to operate functionally, especially with people that I trust. And people are very surprising. It's like there's moments that I've been like, oh God, like, I can't find my friends, like, and somebody will help me. And, you kind of get scared of, are people going to accept me? Are people going to be helpful? And I've
Mm-hmm.
been really pleasantly surprised with the acceptance and the willingness to learn.
I definitely remember in my early 20s or like late teens when I started, I was raised in Canada. So 18, 19 is legal age there, depending on where you are. And I was like touring a lot of that time. So I was able to like start clubbing and going to bars and stuff at 18, 19 years old. And I wouldn't bring my guide dog, obviously. And I also wouldn't bring my cane. I would say to my friends, like, one of you has to stay with me all the time because I'm fully blind and it's blasting loud music and everyone's wasted. So like everybody has to like play babysit Molly and somebody has to stay with me at all times to keep me safe and give me sighted guide. And my friends would do that, but I can tell you the amount of times that people thought I was on drugs because of the way that my friends were like helping me get to the bathroom. And they're like, step, and like they're describing everything around me. And then like somebody would be standing in my way and they'd be like, sorry, she can't see. And they'd be like, whoa, what's she on? Like people were always thinking I was like on some crazy drug that like took my vision temporarily, or especially because my eyes shake. And so like people would like really be thinking I was like out here totally off, and I was not. I just couldn't see, but nobody knew. And one time I almost didn't even get into the club. They were like trying to pat me down, and the like security guard like put his arms up to show me to put my arms up, and I just like stood there smiling. And my friend was like, Molly, put your arms up, and like grabs my arms because she knew I couldn't really hear her. So she like grabs my arms and holds them up. The guy was like, what? And then he's like, ID. And I grab my ID and I hold it like upside down. And he was like, she cannot come in. Like, she is already too drunk to get into this club. And my friends were like, I swear to God, she's blind. And then I'm there and I'm like, I have retinitis pigmentosa. It's a rare eye disease. And I'm like trying to educate this club bouncer.
I remember same kind of thing. I was going to a concert and, it's like one of those, I don't know, when you're in the line, right? But it's like the dividers. It's like the stretchy dividers that are,
Yeah.
line. And I bulldozed it. I mean, like fully like knocked it down. And they were like, they actually put X's on my hands. They're like, you're up. Like you can come in, but like you're drunk. I'm like, no, I'm not. Oh, I went off. I was like, actually, you need to learn about this. So I like fully did this whole thing. And I think they were like, yeah, okay, whatever. But I totally empathize with that. It's like, it's really frustrating when, people just don't understand. And it's like, you want to, obviously, like, we're still people. Like, it doesn't define who we are. We want to do all of these things, but like, it can feel like such a life defining moment in those kind of situations where you feel suddenly like abnormal.
And it was like one of those things where it's funny for me to look back now, because now I would feel so insecure that people don't know that I'm blind, which is funny because when I was younger, I felt so insecure thinking people knew that I was blind. So it's interesting how like when you grow up and you mature and you get more and more comfortable with yourself, your identity, your disability, how that narrative in your own mind switches.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because before going on the show, I wasn't very vocal about my diagnosis. Like, obviously, my friends and family knew, and then the Foundation Fighting Blindness that I'm very involved with, like, they knew, but it wasn't something that I felt really comfortable, like, talking about. And now post-show, it's incredible just the empowerment that's come with this, because there have actually been, like, fans that will come up to me and like, hey, Madison, like, are you able to see in here? And it's, like, so cool to be like, wow, like, you guys remember that there's, a spectrum of disability here. And like, people have been just so receptive. And I mean, I've even had people message me on Instagram. Another guy who had RP, and he was like, I went to an engagement party, and of course I missed somebody trying to shake my hand. And so I started to go into my whole spiel about retinitis pigmentosa. And the girl cut me off and was like, do you have what the girl from Love is Blind has? And it like literally that message like made me cry because it was like, oh my gosh, like finally,
Mm-hmm.
even no matter how small like my impact may be, like it takes just a few more people talking about it and educating about it so that the greater, blind and visually impaired community can benefit from, able-sided people to kind of understand. And it's been really, really cool seeing the impact of my vulnerability and, speaking out on it and being honest about it.
I mean, that's why representation matters so much. And that's why just having one kind of representation isn't enough. And it's frustrating for me working in the entertainment industry because I've been in situations where I'm like pitching TV shows and stuff like that, and I'll receive feedback like, oh, we already have one show on the network that features disability. And it's like, okay, well, it's not even blindness. And even if it was, one representation is not enough. Like, it doesn't represent everybody. And the reality is, like, I represent kind of the scariest version of RP. I represent like the most severe significant vision loss you can have with RP. We need representation of RP that is more like you, that like diagnosed later in life, that has slower progression, that's still able to drive, because there's people with RP who need to see that and know that there's a version of their life that may look like yours and not mine. And equally, society at large needs to see that, yes, there's versions of RP that look like me, who read Braille and use a guide dog, but there's versions of RP that look like you, who don't use any mobility aid and still drive a car. So it's so important that we see just within one disease, in one vision loss journey, it's such a huge spectrum. And I can talk about that all I want, but people seeing it is very different than just talking about it. I wanted to get like your RP story out of the way because that whole context was missing on the show. Like, they didn't give any background. And here I am, I'm like, yeah, whatever about all these other love triangle stories. Get back to the RP. I want the RP story. And then we finally get the pod conversation, and it was so underwhelming because it was so short. I was very frustrated watching that because I was like, I guarantee that conversation was not, hey, I have this disease. Oh, okay. No way that was the full conversation that you two had about that. So I want to know everything leading up to you deciding to tell him, everything about the real unedited conversation. I want to hear all the juice.
What's really interesting that you don't see is I actually had a whole nother connection. I went to proposal day with two people. And so my other connection, I had actually talked about my RP with first. So it was crazy the way it happened because I was kind of debating, like, how do I bring this up in a way that feels like natural, that's not kind of just like, oh, by the way, here's something really crazy about me. So, I was trying to be tactful and think through how I wanted to go about that because, in the real world, it's like, it's pretty apparent. Like if I go to a bar with somebody, I'm kind of like, hey, can you help me to the bathroom? Or like, oh, I kind of ran into the chair as I'm walking up, right? So it'll kind of come up more naturally. In the pods, we didn't have that. So with my first connection, we were playing Would You Rather, and it was like a card game, box of cards. And the first card he pulled was, would you rather go deaf or go blind?
They planted that 100%.
But that's what's crazy. Molly, I was like, pull out every card and tell me like how many of those there are. He's like, there's one. Like he literally went through and like looked, it was not.
How did they not show that scene?
Because they didn't show my whole journey with this other person. So anyways, my whole point was that was like the perfect kind of segue because it came up so naturally. And I was kind of like, well, honestly, I would say like, I'd rather go blind because I kind of am already mentally preparing for this. And so I was able to kind of get the first, conversation out of the way, and I kind of had a little bit more confidence going into it. So then what you see with Joe and I, it's really interesting, and it was kind of hard for me to watch back because, I wasn't planning on bringing it up in that moment. Like we were having this whole conversation about like how aligned we were with our values, about things that we want from a partner, what we look for in a relationship. And I said to him, I was like, yeah, like what's wrong with you? Like, I'm trying to find something and it just seems like this is so perfect. And he's like, yeah, what's wrong with you? It really made me sad that at that point in time, that's where my brain went. Like my brain went to, I know what's wrong with me. I have retinitis pigmentosa. And you see me kind of almost try to mask it with being like, oh, but I look normal. And like, oh, but like this. And I wish that I wouldn't have done that. But at the same time, I understand that there's not a whole lot of understanding or conversation around RP. And so like people that don't know would wouldn't have any idea, when because people don't understand that it's a spectrum. When people hear I have a blinding eye condition, people are typically thinking like, oh, do you wear sunglasses and use a cane and have a dog? Mine is very different, right? Mine looks very different from that. So it was definitely interesting kind of watching that back. So the conversation kind of started there. Honestly, like we did move on pretty quickly from that, but we did have other dates that we talked about it more. So what you don't see is we have this one date where we get each other some gifts, right? Like we bring some things from home. And I had brought a star projector. So it was like, a little thing that you just turn the lights on, it projects stars on the ceiling. And that was kind of like, I was thinking maybe that would be my segue into telling my pod dates that I had RP because of my story with when I went camping with my brother-in-law and my sister. And so we did have a little bit more conversation about, okay, like what exactly does that look like for you? And, we did touch on peripherals are pretty hard for me, like I miss high fives a lot. Stairs are very difficult, especially when they're unmarked or in a very, low lit situation. So there was more conversation. Honestly, though, he didn't really have very many questions for me about it.
That's wild because I feel like when I was dating, every single date I'd go on, they'd put like 20 questions about blindness and then be like, okay, great date. If I went on a date with somebody who had a disability I was unfamiliar with, or especially a progressive disease, I would have questions. That's like so bizarre to me.
It definitely is. I will say this though, like there's so much happening, right? There's so many things going on. And quite honestly, because I don't present as somebody as low vision, I don't think that there was a ton of opportunity for him to want to talk about it or like to be able to see it. Like I kind of told him, and I think they actually showed this on the show, I'm like, really and truly, it takes somebody seeing me run into something to understand kind of what I'm actually experiencing. And you do see this, or I guess, I think you talked about it in your video, you could hear it, where I had gone to go change in my swimsuit and I was coming out and I fully ran into the ottoman and I was like, oh God, and then there's like another moment that I'm getting him water and I run into something else because it's dark. My favorite is when I like go outside. We're in the middle of this huge fight in Mexico and I go outside and I walk into a cactus. Cactus and I'm like crying, But yeah, you would think in those moments that he would have kind of been like, are you okay? Like, do you need help? Like, I mean, that's a whole nother thing, right? So there really wasn't a ton of conversation around it. I will say to his credit, like there were a few times that we went out and I would educate and just kind of be like, hey, like just tell me if there's a curb or tell me if there's like stairs when we go into this restaurant. Like I just need to know, tell me when I'm getting there. And he was adaptable to that. But outside of that, there really wasn't a whole lot of like, what's the prognosis?
I think that's what like surprises me because the reality is being with a partner who's going blind is something you're taking on in your relationship and will change your relationship. Because in my experience, not just with myself, but with all my disabled friends, like those are real conversations that are had in dating. And so it was like really bizarre to me to watch and not see any of that. And it almost made it feel unrealistic. Like I was like, this is not really a realistic experience of like dating with progressive illness. I mean, even the statistics show that like majority of men leave their wives if they are diagnosed with something like cancer.
I don't really know what to make of it either, I guess, because, other relationships that I've had, it's been kind of a progressive conversation where it's, they see me like really run into something and then it's a bit more of like, okay, so, what is your field of vision or, what is the prognosis really? And I guess, we had some of those conversations, but it's like, it's such a short time frame, first of all. Like we're on a TV show, we're dealing with like a ton of other things that are happening. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was something that he just didn't really, again, because I present more able than I may be, I think that's probably a big part of it. And that's kind of why I said to him, like, yeah, like it really takes somebody seeing what this disability does for me for them to understand, So I don't know. I'm not really sure why there wasn't more conversation, but I don't think that's fully on him. I think I probably could have talked about it more as well. But I am sad about just from the Netflix perspective, like, because there were times that I fell on camera. Like, there were definitely times that I was running into things, and I think it would have been helpful to kind of show that a little bit more. And there was also a time that my producer was like, I think tonight we're going to have you kind of sit down with your little star projector and talk more about your diagnosis. And I was like, great. Like, oh my God, finally. Like, I can't wait to really dive into this. And then that never happened. I don't know what was going on there.
Well, it's fascinating to me since they did use you guys as the clickbait and then showed so little of real discussion around RP. But I was like happy to see your mom like really pointedly be like, will you stick by her if she goes blind or when she loses her vision or however she worded it? I was like, yes, Mom, like cutting to the point. And then he really was just like, yep. Like it was like such a non-response. And I was like, either he just really loves her or he is like completely checking out and not even like connecting to this.
I would say it's that one.
Yeah, in retrospect, I could see now, I think it was that one, but in real time, I was like, I'm confused here. And I don't know, like, I think a lot of people in shows like this are like really careful with how they appear on camera. And so I was like, does he want to seem like that guy who's like, a woman's gonna tell me that she's gonna go blind, but I'm the guy who's totally cool with it? Like, does he just want to not come off like a jerk? As you said, like you'd find natural ways to bring it up, which I totally relate to when I was dating, especially on dating apps. So if I act like my RP is the end of the world and is a huge deal, that's how you're going to perceive it. But if I own it with confidence and I'm like, yeah, it's just a part of me, it's no big deal, then that is equally how you will receive that information. But I would never put it in my profile. So I'm curious how you would handle it, or how do you handle it now, and has it changed?
I love that question. I would say it's changed in my confidence. Like, kind of how you're saying, where if you act like it's a big, horrible thing, people are going to treat it like it's a big, horrible thing. And I think prior to the show, I didn't catastrophize. You know what I'm trying to say? I didn't make it a bigger deal than it needed to be, but I definitely was a little bit more kind of like tiptoey around it.
Yeah.
Whereas now I don't have it in my profile. I am back on the dating apps, but it's a little bit more just kind of it comes up if it comes up, because I don't want this to define me, right?
Yeah.
Like it is a part of who I am. It is not my end all be all. While I am huge on the advocacy side and I love talking about it and educating on it, it's not my entire personality, right? So when I'm on dates now, actually, here's a perfect example. We had gone to a bar. I went to the bathroom, which, by the way, I knew this bar very, very well. I always, on a first date, pick a place that I know that I can do without somebody having to help me or navigate it, right?
Good blind girl life hack.
Yep. Yes, exactly. Big life hack there. So I was coming back from the bathroom and somebody had moved like a little like seat, like it was like a little stool, kind of looked like an ottoman. And they had moved it like a foot from where I remembered it being when I went to the bathroom. I ran right into it. And my date was like, oh my God, are you okay? I was like, blind girl shit. Anyway, so then I like sat down. I'm like, yeah, so I have this thing. And, I just told him, I'm like, makes it kind of hard. As you can see, like peripherally pretty difficult. Like right now looking at you, up close, like I can see maybe your eyes and your nose. Like it's kind of like a narrowed spotlight, right? So I try to let it just kind of come up organically and naturally. But it's also been interesting, like since the show, when people are like, well, why did you go on the show? Like, what did you learn from the show? And that also gives me a moment to kind of be like, well, I went on the show because this simulates what my life would be like if I were to lose my vision. I have something called retinitis pigmentosa, right? So there's been a lot of different kind of avenues for me to bring it up now, and to bring it up with a lot more confidence and conviction than I did before.
Do you find most people's reactions is like Joe's, or do you find it's different? And of course, for me, I was always dating post-vision loss. So for me, all of my dating experience has been like as a full guide dog cane user, like total blindness, needing help. So they like immediately understood the impact that my blindness would have on our relationship if we were to date. But do you find, because you are earlier on in the vision loss, you don't present as blind, like they're not fully understanding what that might look like in the future, that most men are more so reacting like Joe? Or how do you find it happens?
His reaction was a little bit more normal for me, just because it's never been something that's like a ton of questions, but it's kind of like it'll come up organically throughout our relationship. I find that most men are kind of like, wow, like, I'm really sorry to hear that, or like, tell me a little bit about that. And so, I'll kind of go through my whole spiel. I talk about my advocacy work, my involvement with Foundation Fighting Blindness. And I kind of go through how I've made it a positive in my life rather than a negative.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people are like kind of impressed by that. We're like, wow, that's really cool. They're using this in, a better way. I think truly I've been pretty like just surprised at how receptive people are in dating with it. Even sometimes like on a second date, they'll like remember, well, they'll be like, hey, like, can you read the menu in here? Or, like, do you need help with this? And so it has been very nice because I think the fear is that we're not going to be accepted or we're not going to be lovable or we're not enough because we're not fully able, right? And I have been very happily surprised. That said, I've also had guys make like full out jokes about it or like, there was a moment that Joe kind of poked fun at me not being able to see. And it was like, I don't think he thought of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of more like he's showing me something. He's like, oh, really? You can't see this right now? I'm like, no, truly, I cannot see it right now. I guess somewhat mixed bag, but in general, like very receptive and people wanting to learn, but definitely not to the degree of like 20 questions because, to your point, like I don't present as much, right? I don't show that as much.
Right. Whereas for me, it's like every single thing I do is impacted by being blind. So it's like, how are you texting me right now? How are you right? Like, it's like literally how did you put your makeup on? Like men who would never be curious about a woman's makeup or like asking me beauty questions and about how did you put an outfit on? How do you eat your food? Like they literally can't comprehend how I wipe my butt when I poop. So I'm like sitting there and I'm like,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
So that's like my experience dating, but that's again why showing the spectrum of experience is so important because like there's people earlier on in their vision loss journey or who have more stable like usable vision than I do who maybe watch my content about dating as a blind woman and they don't relate to it because they're like, well, that's not my experience. Just like I'm listening to you and I'm like, damn, that's not been my experience dating as a blind girl with RP. Again, this is why representation matters. And was that for you like a big part of wanting to go on the show? Because as you're saying, like you are really involved in the FFB and in advocacy. So was it part like wanting to simulate for yourself the experience and part the opportunity to raise awareness? Like, what was your motivating factor?
I mean, truly the motivating factor was just that I wanted to see what connection would feel like without vision. I wanted to simulate that. Honestly, I didn't know if I wanted to talk about it on camera. Like, I truly had not gone into that even with that as like a thought in my mind because it was just kind of like, I don't know, like I'm scared. Like am I ready to like be this vulnerable with the whole world? Like, am I ready to like say these things? And, the more that I did it, the more that I was like, yeah, like this is empowering and like this is important work. But really like the advocacy part of it was kind of an accident where RP is part of my life, right? It is part of my story. And so naturally that became a part of kind of my platform now.
Yeah, there's no way to avoid it when it is a part of who you are and a part of your future with this potential partner. So if you went into it not really even like thinking you were going to be talking about it potentially, what was your audition process like? Like, is it something that you brought up? Because like, obviously you check all the boxes for the casting, right? Like, you're a beautiful girl, you have a great personality, you were the right age group, the right location, like you check all of the boxes, you're a good personality for camera. But I'm like, in my perspective, it's like also the RP makes for a great story, right? Like they're always looking for people who are gonna have a good story. So was that something that casting kind of brought up or that you brought up to casting early on? Or was it something that unfolded later?
Yeah, no, that was absolutely something that I brought up like call number one, because that's my why, right? Like they want to know why Love is Blind. And I'm like, because I have this eye condition and like this would give me the opportunity to simulate what my life could be like. And I think, yeah, of course, they were like, hell yeah, let's get the blindish girl on Love is Blind.
Yeah.
I think that was definitely something that worked in my favor, right? It's kind of like life in lemons, lemonade, whatever. So that's kind of what I was going off with that. But I mean, it really was my why for doing it, right? Of course, like it sounded fun. Of course, it sounds interesting. It's a very unique experience. But, my why was quite a bit deeper than just the kind of stereotypical reasons for wanting to go on a show like this.
We have so much more that we have to cover. So make sure your notifications are turned on. The next video I post will be the follow-up interview, the second half. And until then, you can click over here to watch that original video I did about Love is Blind watching Madison on the show, or you can click over here to see a video I made a couple years ago about my general thoughts on Love is Blind as a real blind person. See you next time.